The mother of horrors Hulk sounds like something out of a Stephen King novel, but she also looks amazing at the same time. So this all takes place in Infernal Hulk issue number 4. So what this does is this picks up with the Infernal Hulk attacking a plane. Now on the surface it seems irrelevant, right? But we're told, we've lost contact with the ambassador's plane. Mr. President, what do you want us to do, sir? And the president just kind of responds, do, right? It's the Hulk. Close down all air travel over the North Atlantic. They are already done. I don't really know if this thing is Bruce Banner's Hulk or if that one is still out there somewhere. But if he is still out there, if he can even stop that thing, I hope he shows himself soon, while there are still some of us left to save. So to kind of fill the gaps in, for those of you guys who are either joining for the first time or have forgotten what's been happening, the idea behind Infernal Hulk is that it is a continuation from Philip Kennedy Johnson's Incredible Hulk run. The idea behind the Infernal Hulk is that in the lead up to this run, there was a being called the ELDEST, and we'll explain more about them as we get further into this. But what the ELDEST had done was literally tear the Incredible Hulk and Bruce Banner apart, physically separating them. So as it stands right now, Bruce Banner is out in the real world, and he's operating under the identity of David Hamilton, basically trying to keep a low profile in a very unassuming and innocuous role within the world itself. In addition to that, the ELDEST had basically possessed the physical form of the Incredible Hulk, literally taken it over. And that's what you're seeing here, right? The ELDEST, of course, being a demonic entity. But it's basically been going on a warpath throughout all of this to try to seize control of the world and effectively spark another war with the one above all. And we'll talk about what that means here in a minute. But at this point, we transition over to the Hulkscape. Now, one of the cool things that you see here is kind of one of the things that everybody's talking about, at least on the art side, is the golden ratio spiral, which I learned about through photography. But basically, it's the idea that it just kind of zooms in on a particular thing. You see this all the time, movies, photos, the whole 9 yards. And basically, when you see the Infernal Hulk, it's designed to show that from the Infernal Hulk's perspective, everything revolves around the ELDEST. But then when you look at the Incredible Hulk, when you switch over to that within the Hulkscape, it's kind of spiraling out to simply illustrate there is a much bigger world here than we initially believe. Because if you're ever familiar with the Incredible Hulk mythos, the Hulkscape is where the Incredible Hulk persona goes whenever Bruce Banner is the one running the show. And when the Incredible Hulk is the one running the show, Bruce Banner is within the Hulkscape, right? But there really aren't a whole lot of occupants here outside of maybe the other altars. But things have changed drastically since the ELDEST got involved in all of this. Because once you zoom out and you look at the Hulkscape for what it is, there's all kinds of monsters and beasts and crazy things within this place, beings of various size, some of whom have died, some of whom are still alive. It's kind of wild. And so as the Incredible Hulk continues on, he ends up approaching this tree, and under this tree is a Captain America backpack, which of course belongs to Charlene Tidwell. Now, Charlene is a character who was introduced at the beginning of Philip Kennedy Johnson's run, and where her story began to grow and expand at the end of the City of Idols storyline in issue number 19, going into, I think it was called Gods Drink Blood, starting with issue 21 up to 25. The long and short of Charlene's character is that in the beginning, she was one of the characters introduced in the Hulk mythos that literally basically humanized him, right? It kind of gave the Incredible Hulk more of a human personality, because where he initially rejected her, over time he began to see himself as a protector of her, especially when it came to Bruce Banner. And so once you get to issues 19 through 25, that's when you start getting into the Skinwalkers and Lycana and the idea of Charlene basically gaining what's called the God Skin. And we'll talk about that again here in a minute, because we kind of transition over to that, right? What ends up happening is that while the Hulk is here, there's just like this giant wolf that shows up out of nowhere and has a doll of Charlene in its mouth. And the Hulk just says, hey, right, that's mine, and goes to chase after it. And when he finally catches it, when it runs over a hill, he ends up coming across this burning fire where this voice says, my fair-haired cousin spake of thee. I expected bigger, but thou art as ugly as he says. And so Bruce asks the question, right? How are you here? This place is mine. And this guy responds, thine, eaten by a beast, art thou the master of its belly? No, Hulk, this be my prison now, just as it's yours. Now, this is Agmunder, and this guy is incredibly important to the bigger picture of what's happening here, specifically when it comes to the ELDEST as well as Lycana and Charlene. The reason being because Agmund was at one point an Asgardian before he was basically killed and consumed by the ELDEST. What ended up happening is that before he was consumed, the ELDEST had used Agmund to spawn an offspring called Lycana. Now, Lycana had all the same shape-shifting powers that Agmund did, but what ended up happening is in, I think it was issue number 19 or number 25, I think it was 25, that Thor had basically faced off against Lycana and killed her, considering her existence to be a desecration of an Asgardian, right, specifically of Agmund. And so when that happened, her body was left on Earth. And so that's when you go into the idea of the Skinwalker story, the City of Idols, so on and so forth, in the Incredible Hulk story from Philip Kennedy Johnson, where you end up learning that at some point in the past, a tribe had come across the body of Lycana and in desperation consumed it, all the while failing to realize they were consuming the nature of her powers. And what they started doing was building a cult around her. And what had happened was that over time, an individual was chosen to receive the direct abilities and really the lion's share of Lycana's power in what was known as possession of the God skin. And that's where Charlene came into play. The idea was that in the lead up to this, Charlene was given the God skin and then basically became a host for Lycana, which gave her the ability to shapeshift and all that kind of stuff. Now, Charlene's story just kind of ends there. She ends up taking off, going and doing her own thing, basically abandoning the Incredible Hulk for reasons that we don't have to go into here. But this is simply just designed to illustrate that Agmund is just another person consumed by the ELDEST in order to bolster the ELDEST's powers. But it also explains where the ELDEST gets their shape-shifting abilities from and taking on different forms and bestowing them on other people. And so in this conversation, Agmund ends up turning into a crow, right, and says, there are others as well. Others I would have thou meet. Follow good Agmund. And then he takes off, right, with the doll in tow, knowing it's the only way to get the Incredible Hulk to actually follow him. When that happens, as they transition through, the Incredible Hulk is hit by a giant flying bat and sent crashing down into the ground and landing in a child's room. And there's this voice that simply says, you not belong here, only Hulk is Hulk. Who are you? And that's when we find out it's Savage Hulk. Now, one of the cool things, and this is kind of Philip Kennedy Johnson's most recent interpretation of it, over the years in Marvel Comics, in one form or another, we've seen stories where the Incredible Hulk encounters his alters. We saw that, for example, in Immortal Hulk from Al Ewing. What Philip Kennedy Johnson is doing here is essentially establishing this idea that all the different alters of the Incredible Hulk have their own quote-unquote realm within the Hulkscape, which is to say, when Savage Hulk is not manifesting, this is where he's at, hanging out in a child's room, playing with toys. This is particularly important because when he sees the Incredible Hulk, which at this point is known as the Fractured Son, so he is his own personality separate from the other versions of the Hulk, that the Fractured Son asks, right, I am you, and I think we're dead. And of course, Savage Hulk doesn't want to hear that. He's just like, shut up, Hulk not dead, and immediately attacks Fractured Son and says, you are not Hulk. Tell the truth, and sends him crashing through a wall. And at that moment, the eldest son lands in a casino, and that's when he comes across Joe Fixit. And Fixit just says, well, you are a handsome devil, but this game is invite only. Now, one of the things to also notice here is he's playing poker with a few other people. There's Abomination. The redheaded woman is one of the people that have been possessed by the ELDEST. That was during like City of Idols and the lead up to the City of Idols story. You've got Red Harpy, right? So these are all kind of in some capacity alters or people again who have been absorbed by the ELDEST. Abomination was one of them, right? Abomination was absorbed by the ELDEST. And so when Savage Hulk gets in here, Savage Hulk is like, what in the heck is this? And that's where Joe Fixit is like, this one too, right? How many of you jokers are there? So it's kind of a weird statement because it indicates that Joe Fixit does not know who Savage Hulk is, which we know that's not true. Now, this is kind of one of those interpretive statements, so you can take it in a variety of ways. But Joe Fixit says, I guess it makes sense, right? Banner went crazy way before us. But like I said, this is invite only. So again, the context of this statement from Joe Fixit would give off the impression he doesn't know about the other alters of the Incredible Hulk. But nonetheless, this guy breaks out a Tommy gun and opens fire. Starts spraying this guy down. Now, of course, it's not enough to kill him, and it never would be. But he's sent flying out of the room. And that's where another voice chimes in and says, get up, stranger. There is a war to win. And that's when you realize it's Green Scar talking. So this is one of the things that I hope you guys are starting to pick up, right? We're kind of seeing seeing this statement being made to us by Philip Kennedy Johnson that the alters of the Incredible Hulk do not know who the others are. They are not aware of who the others are. Now, this is kind of one of those under-the-radar retcons that's basically been introduced here by Philip Kennedy Johnson, because again, we've seen other alters encounter each other, but referring to themselves as stranger, being surprised by the fact that another version of them exists, this all points to the idea that it's a massive retcon from Johnson in this story. But nonetheless, right, once all these Hulks are out here and they see this great big huge battle going on, the Hulks do what the Hulks do best. They attack everything, right? Every single thing they can see. And that's exactly what goes down here. Now, of course, you also have like frost giants and things like that being destroyed. But for those of you guys who are familiar with the recent stories being told by Marvel, this also brings up a very, very big question, which is this: what's going on with Green Scar? Because if you saw our videos on Imperial or you read Imperial, Green Scar showed up in that story, right? So where did Green Scar manifest from, right? How does that fit into the larger continuity? Well, one of the things to know and keep in mind about Imperial is that outside of the fact that it focuses on space, it doesn't really seem to tie in directly to a lot of the continuity going on with the Incredible Hulk mythos. So this is one of those times when you just kind of have to like accept that that happened and then try not to reconcile the two. This happens pretty frequently in Marvel, a lot more in Marvel than it does in DC, to be honest, but it does happen, right? So this is one of those don't think too much about it type of situations. But the fact is, right, Fractured Sun asked the question, where did all these others come from? And that's where Green Scar chimes in and says, none of you get it, right? Everyone Eldest ever consumed or possessed is in here with us. Everyone, over millions of years, including you, me, and the Mother of Horrors. So, a little bit of explanation here. Again, for those of you guys getting caught up, is that when it comes to the Mother of Horrors, this was the being that waged the war against the one above all. The Mother of Horrors kind of came into existence and was introduced by Philip Kennedy Johnson as sort of the antithesis to the one above all. Now, I know some of you guys might be coming from a place of, well, I thought that you said that in Al Ewing's Defenders Beyond, the one above all was just one of a number of new cosmic entities that existed out there. Yeah, and then Marvel undid it like that, right? So the one above all is just the one above all. That's it. It's not part of this new realm of cosmic entities with Enigma or anything like that. It's simply just the one above all. But one of the things to know is that in Philip Kennedy Johnson's early run of The Incredible Hulk, he introduced this idea that while the one above all is responsible for being a prime mover more than anything else, which is to say, basically setting in motion the creation of the universe, the multiverse, and all that kind of stuff, that at some point, the Mother of Horrors manifested as kind of the antithesis to the one above all. So the closest that you get in Marvel Comics to a traditional God of Abraham and Satan, right? That kind of thing. And so the Mother of Horrors represents all dark and evil deeds that exist out there. Now, how that reconciles with beings like Mephisto or something like that, Satanish, right? These various entities out there, that hasn't really been cleared up by Philip Kennedy Johnson. And while the Mother of Horrors doesn't really represent like the one below all, I don't know if I would give her a 100% one-to-one comparison to like God and Satan. That's why I say the closest that we get to that. But the point is, there came a point when she waged war against the one above all through her son. And the one above all had basically defeated the Mother of Horrors and destroyed the son. And when that happened, it demoralized the Mother of Horrors on such a level that she chose to never go to war against the one above all again. And so that leads into the story of the Eldest, because once the Eldest basically returns, the first thing that she wanted to do was to seek out the Mother of Horrors and reignite the war against the one above all as revenge over what had happened with her brother. But because the Mother of Horrors was so demoralized by it all, the Mother of Horrors didn't even speak, didn't even talk. And so in turn, the Eldest destroyed and consumed the Mother of Horrors, taking her power, and that's what gets us to what's happening in the Infernal Hulk right now. And so what ends up going on here is that when the Mother of Horrors shows up, something to know is that her form is different from what it traditionally looks like. She looks like a Hulk, which makes sense given that she's in a Hulkscape. And in fact, she starts addressing everyone that way, right? You little beasts were not meant to find each other. No matter, back in your cages soon enough. And so the Mother of Horrors starts attacking all of them. Now, of course, this leads to a kind of Arnold Schwarzenegger, Predator type thing. If it bleeds, we can kill it. And that's what ends up happening, right? The Hulk recognizes that in attacking it, it bleeds, right? And the Fractured Sun's just like, yeah, 100% that it does. So if it does bleed, it can be destroyed. And that's when Savage Hulk asks, so what happens if Hulk kills it. But the mother of horrors just kind of laughs at him and just says, "Kill me, little brutes. I am Hulk now," and just tears Savage Hulk in half. And then in turn says, "And Hulk is the strongest there is," and overpowers and defeats every version of the Hulk here. Now, this also raises a very big question, and it's one that I've seen circulating around the internet, right? Twitter, TikTok, the whole 9 yards. That question being, is the Immortal Hulk mythos still intact? And the answer to that question is yes. For those of you guys who don't know what that means, during Al Ewing's run on the Immortal Hulk, he introduced something called the Green Door, which basically means that every time anyone with gamma radiation dies, they go down to the below place, right? The realm of the one below all. And they can enter through the Green Door, and they're usually driven to, right? They desire to go back through the Green Door. But when they enter into the Green Door, they resurrect, they return, which is kind of an explanation for how it is that the Incredible Hulk can never actually die, because there have certainly been instances in Marvel Comics when by all rights, he should have been dead, but somehow or another, he didn't. He ended up returning. That's how the whole Immortal Hulk mythos kicked in. Now, the reason why I say that it is still in continuity is because in Philip Kennedy Johnson's Incredible Hulk issue number 24, there's a point with the whole, Charlene Tidwell Godskin scenario where the Incredible Hulk and Charlene go to the Sanctum Sanctorum in order to figure out a way to cure her of this affliction. Initially, they meet Clea because Doctor Strange is dead at that point in time, and Clea took his place as the Sorcerer Supreme. It turned out the whole thing was a trap, but there was a point where Bruce Banner was led into a room that suppresses gamma radiation, so the Incredible Hulk could not manifest. And then because it was a trap, Bruce Banner was killed and consumed by skinwalkers. Once they leave the room, then the Incredible Hulk manifests and literally pops out in all his beautiful glory, just literally tearing out of these guys. So that was kind of Philip Kennedy Johnson confirming that the Incredible Hulk will always return to life so long as the Incredible Hulk can manifest. But that is a big caveat, right? If that gamma radiation is taken from Bruce or suppressed in any capacity and the Incredible Hulk cannot manifest, Bruce will stay dead permanently, right? So again, it's a cool little tidbit there, right? If you're reading between the lines. But the fact is, right, focusing on the comic, that when Bruce kind of wakes up from this whole experience, right back where he was before, after having been defeated by the Mother of Horrors, that's when Agmund says, "What have you learned, fractured son?" And the Hulk just says that he's not alone. And that is where Agmund tells him, "Nor are you helpless. You are a lot stronger than you think you are, and you are stronger in greater numbers." And so he says, "But with the mother's corruptive seed, the eldest remains too strong. Perhaps Agmund can send thee yet another ally." Now, we don't know who that ally is going to be. Potentially, it will be Charlene, but the bigger point that's being made here is the source of ELDEST's power, and why ELDEST is able to do all the things they're doing now is because they have the power of the Mother of Horrors. If you can destroy or defeat or even get the Mother of Horrors to cut off their access to the ELDEST, then in turn, the ELDEST will just revert back to a normal form and can just be killed by Fractured Son in any number of ways, right? Beating their head off, beating them to death, right? Grabbing him by the foot, smashing him into the ground like he did with Loki or me whenever I'm playing Marvel Rivals and I fight against a good Incredible Hulk, whatever the case happens to be. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, drop a like. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.